welcome back.
Welcome back.
We're going to go over the contract changes for 2022. Not a lot of major things that happened. A lot of good stuff happened, I would say, but nothing that.
Mostly good stuff. All good stuff.
Yes. Hopefully none that will make you use your insurance.
That's good.
Okay. So.
And we're not going over every single TAR form that's been changed. We're going to hit the highlights of the ones that you use 97% of the time. So we're not, no. Sadly, no, we're not going to do a reading of all the forms.
Beautiful.
So just understand if things changed in the residential listing agreement, they changed in the commercial as well. Same thing on the purchase and sale agreement. There's some changes to the lots. There's some changes to new construction, but we're not going over that. We're just going to go over the RF 401, the one that we use again, 90% of the time.
Perfect. Okay, so this is just, they made an update. If you're releasing your buyer's rep, if you have a buyer that y'all want to divorce, then you have an updated form that instead of says agency, it says buyer's representation. Huge change. Okay.
So it's the same form, listing.
It's the same form.
So whether it's a listing you're releasing or a buyer you're releasing, it's the same form now.
Previously, it just said listing, agency, mutual release, and now it says listing / buyer representation, mutual release.
So same form for both purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Less is more, right?
Okay. All right. A big one that was discussed was, so with VA or FHA, sometimes in a loan of that type, we get any feedback. Sometimes the lender could require that you hook the property up to sewer if public sewer is available. It doesn't specify really whose expense that's at. A lot of times it would, I guess, fall on the seller.
Typically is the seller.
So they clarified this in the purchase and sale. It was on the VA FHA loan addendum. It had a big section about that. Pretty much this says if it is discovered at any point, not just during inspection period, but at any point during your contract process, and the lender is requiring that the property be hooked up to public sewer, you have 5 days upon finding that out to come to some kind of resolution, whether the seller pays it, y'all pay it, or there's a mixture of both.
And it's public water and sewer. Sometimes there are places, you know, more rural, may have city water available, but they don't have sewer.
Right.
Does it define availability like within
It would be, typically the seller would have gotten notification that they have to hook up to public sewer or water. I guess they wouldn't require water. I don't know about water, but typically they get a notice. So there is a section on the property condition disclosure which talks about any utility changes. The seller hereby affirms there's no utility changes, and then some other items. This would fall under that. So if your seller has received that information and does not disclose that that is a new requirement, but they have not done it, that could be a problem.
It could be a problem, and that could be a problem. Like that's not rural necessarily. There's some old houses in Green Hills that have a septic, believe it or
that
not.
would be like if it was previously on septic and then they ran a sewer up there and then they're required
to hook it up. Yeah. And they have not, but they didn't disclose that, or they didn't know that. And the lender is now saying public sewer or water is available. Our requirement is that you hook up to that. So then you know, if that could happen at the 11th hour, hopefully not. I would say an appraiser is probably going to catch this if it's a lender requirement, but you have 5 days to resolve that. So this is something kind of new that we'll probably experience out there in 37064.
Probably.
But
Water and sewer, public water or public sewer system. I would get, my guess would be in some more rural areas, they'll have water available, but not sewer. So if water's, my interpretation would be if water's at the street.
yes.
Not, well, if public entities will require that in certain areas once the septic fails. For example, there's a whole area in Franklin, 37064, where when those systems fail, they no longer can get a new septic system. They will have to connect to sewer. There's some areas in Brentwood, right off of Murray Lane. If those people were required to hook on, and there's a big penalty if they didn't. So that would be something that would need to be disclosed as well.
They had to have. It's like, oh, we have an option. No.
Not really, yeah. Like Brentwood didn't really give them an option.
And it was about that term.
It depends on how far, my understanding is, depends on how far it is to the house
Yeah.
and, you know, what the plumber charges to
Yeah.
get to the house. All right.
All right, so our favorite, we have two things to discuss here. Okay, so line 324 to 333, what you see in blue is the buyer retains the ability to accept the property in as-is condition during the resolution period. Kind of a little bit of a backstory on that. When, let's say 2021 contract, you have a couple options. You can accept the property as is, or you can go through a repair proposal resolution process. A lawsuit popped up that said, hey, you sent over your repair list, so you have now waived your ability to accept the property in as-is condition, which I'm guessing about half of us have probably done at some point in our career during repairs when the seller said, I'm not fixing anything, and you're like, fine, we'll just take it as is. Contractually, there was no option to do that. They mutually agreed upon resolution, meaning you would need to send over a repair amendment that says buyer is accepting property in as-is condition. The seller has to sign and accept that, and then the resolution period has ended. There's obviously an argument of good faith, which is my least favorite argument, that if the seller, why is the seller now not allowing them to accept the property as is? Like, how dare you submit 5 options or 5 things for us to request? So this came up, and we added, you retain the right during resolution period to accept the property as is. I was speaking with Todd Scholler, who's one of the attorneys that helps Tennessee Realtor come up with the contracts. It still says in this section that you have to have a mutually agreed upon resolution. So his recommendation would be to send notification and also send a repair amendment that says buyer is now accepting property in as-is condition, and get the seller to sign it. If the seller refuses, you know, you're going to end up in court anyway. But that is his recommendation because it still falls under a mutually agreed upon section.
This is another thing that the market in the last 18 months has highlighted.
Yep.
So you'll notice many of the changes that you're going to see are because of things that have happened, because of just the market in the such a strong seller's market. Like this whole thing about, well, I'm not making any repairs and I'm not even going to sell it to you now.
Right.
This is a 2021 problem.
Yeah.
We never had this issue until
This year or last
year.
Okay, and then the big blue paragraph is a pass-fail, our least favorite description, inspection. So lovely Lloyd Carney typed this up for us. It's in office clauses. So no longer will you have to type this. There's 3 options under inspections: immediately accept the property as is, do repair proposal resolution, or we're going to waive our ability to request repairs. And we're just going to do essentially an inspection. And if it doesn't come back favorable, we still have to give you a list of items, but we're going to be able to terminate and not ask any repairs.
So this is your village clause that's now been incorporated into the purchase and sale agreement.
So you will no longer need that
So
language.
you don't need
anymore.
these terrible bad worded, nobody knows what, we think we know what they mean when they say in special steps, pass, fail only. Well, what does that mean? So this is just cleans up the language for everybody to use. What was basically the village? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's village language. I know, it's perfect, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you don't have to
Yeah.
remember that or anything. So
Do we have stock verbiage on like a appraisal contingency? Like-
but there's more.
There's
Just
more.
wait.
There's more village
Yeah.
clauses.
I'm jumping ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool your jets, okay?
Don't worry,
Some of these are just kind of, you can obviously read this at your leisure. We capitalized I in inspections under the mutual release documentation where you would get your earnest money back. Previously, there was no option to select appraisal, meaning if the appraisal came back less than contract price and you want to terminate, you would have to put other or a condition in the contract. So this was
So
added.
hopefully this is also what I call a 2021 problem. We have had, it did come up, there was a lot of earnest money on the line, like 30,000 in earnest money. And so, but the buyer did not, they wanted to use the appraisal contingency to terminate, but they didn't want to give the seller a copy of the appraisal. Unfortunately, the purchase and sale agreement language has not been changed, but the language on here has been changed to, you'll note the blue there, if applicable, buyers have provided sellers with all required documentation. And then appraisal is listed there as well, because we have had some stinky situations where the buyer, for whatever reason, doesn't want to give them the loan denial letter. They don't want to give them the appraisal or et cetera. So hopefully the required addition in there will take care of that.
So yeah, so
Yes,
this
it's
is
on
why
the
we went
mutual release.
digital and not printed a lot of stuff. Oh. So we're not going through the actual contract. We're just going through the contract changes PDF, but you'll see that in the, so this would be in the mutual release. So do you have the earnest money? No, okay. So this would just be in that one specific form. This whole packet. Yeah. It's like 120 pages. That's why we didn't want to kill.
And we do have another copy up
What's
here. We
left?
can make some more if you want.
All righty. Some of these is just,
And you'll see on the FHA loan addendum, all the stuff they added in the contract, they took out on that addendum. So the FHA VA. So it just moved. It's still there. It just moved to a different place.
okay, shall be deemed zero if left blank. So non-allowables are only for VA buyers, which most of y'all will know. So if you get an FHA buyer, don't worry about this blank. You don't have to put anything in there. So they're just saying it's zero if it's left blank. I would say I haven't even really seen a lot of people charge non-allowable fees. The lender doesn't charge them, the title company doesn't charge them. But that is what that section is for. So
I mean, essentially it's a termite letter that is a non-allow. I don't really know of another
I think there's
non-allowable.
there's certain things that not besides like base commission we can't charge a VA buyer, but there's certain things a lender and a title company cannot charge, and they know that. So
And they waive it. So
Yeah.
the only, if you, the short-term rental, I just want to point that out for those of you. There is a investment property addendum you can use.
and I would probably recommend this highly, given the rate of changes that Metro is doing for short-term rentals. Then we just kind of tidied up notification. There was no spot to say you've moved up to primary position, so they added that in there. We will go over the co-listing agreement. We have a new form. So like Jan had a co-list with a different brokerage. And so typically you have to do 2 separate listing agreements for half or whatever the compensation is. This makes it a little bit easier to do something like that. So we'll go over that form.
And you would just put it in the special steps or addendums there on the listing agreement. Hey, I'm listing this with
Here we
you
go.
know,
Right here.
XYZ company.
So here's the co-listing agreement forms. It goes over all the necessary things as far as compensation, terms, all that good stuff. So
That's only if you're bringing in
Another
another firm.
firm.
Yeah. us in Parks, us in Pilkerton, us in Keller, something like that. All right.
So
All
a good
right.
form. All right.
Will, we tried.
It's much more complicated.
So it's not really, I promise.
It's not really. It's easy to understand.
There was so many issues with, we're going to pay up to 50,000. Well, what if it's 55,000? Do I have to buy as a buyer? Does a seller have to sell as a seller? Depending on who wanted to get out, it was yes or no. So instead of making it just a clause, they wanted to cover all their bases on what happened. So instead of it being an appraisal gap, you will just take whatever the contract price is minus 50,000 or whatever your gap is, and that is your minimum appraisal amount. Meaning if it's a $200,000 house, we're willing to pay $30,000 over appraised value. We're going to lower the appraised value down to 170. Because all the contracts are based on their sales price. So if it does not equal or exceed the sales price, there's the problem. So this is why they're kind of shifting things around on that.
So if you look there, line 9, that's where you write in whatever your minimum appraisal. So if you have, let's say the house is listed at 475 and your people have offered 550 and you want to say, well, we'll pay anything as long as it appraises for list price, you would write in 475. So that's your now minimum guarantee, minimum appraisal, and buyer will pay anything over.
That specifies where the notification, where the funds will-
Yes, so within 5 days, and there's no magic, they didn't say 5 days for any particular reason. If it were me, I would want this probably at the offer, kind of like a pre-approval. The contract says I can give you that in 3 days. You'd probably want that kind of immediately.
And it also asked on here that seller can ask for your proof of funds.
Yeah.
So if you're guaranteeing
So-
another 75,000
Line
or
25.
50,000 or whatever it is that your buyer's guaranteeing, they need to be able to provide that.
And once that's requested, you have 2 days to deliver.
If like, say it's day 7 and we haven't gotten it and I say, Will, we need that. Tomorrow's day 1, the next day is day 2, and then the contract terminates. Be careful on those kind of things, kind of like, you know, you didn't give me your loan commitment and the 14-day period where you have to order appraisal, because if that, I mean, you know, you can't, as Bobby Noreen would say, you can't, what is it, revive a dead cow or calf, whatever she said. Horse. She did have a cow. What was that cow's name? Foster. Oh, now it's a nice blanket.
He lived a very long,
He
happy
did.
life.
He did. I love that story. But once you make demand, if they don't satisfy in 2 days, the contract's dead. Now there's ways to address that, but you don't really want to get in that situation unless you're prepared to walk away because you're in default. at that
Yeah, earnest money is another thing that you, once you request it, then they have the timeline.
So any questions? Let me check TV Land to see if there's any.
Oh,
Yes. Correct. So you would put the name of this form. So in exhibits, addenda, in that box right above special stipulations, you would just put minimum appraisal value contingency addenda. And you would send it with the offer.
So again, this is not in office clauses now. So the pass fail's gone away. The
This is
appraisal
going
gap
back.
has gone away because they're addressed here with either in the contract or by a separate form.
There you
I
go.
was like reading it, and I was like,
Yeah. It's a great form. It just spells out what happened. So there's no question on, do I have to sell? Do I have to buy? You mean the seller doesn't have to take it now that it's $100,000 less than our contract price? No, they don't. So
Again, this is kind of the village version of it, and they expounded on it a little bit.
all right, so we talked a little bit about this earlier. So line 37 through 41, we added, in the event a buyer broker compensation is considered a non-allowable, which it is, to the VA guidelines and thus cannot be paid by buyer, this obligation is waived by broker. So if I put 3 in this blank on line 40 or line 39, and it's 2.5, I'm working for 2.5. And you're doing your duty as a veteran, or that they're a veteran. The problem, lies if it's $1 or something like that, where the compensation is way less. That's something I don't know what's going to happen at that point.
Right.
So yeah. All right.
And the base commission is non-allowable on a VA.
You can't charge them any commissions at all. I think, really? What do you have on your? Yes.
did you say there's no base commission on VA? Is that the same on that page?
No,
No.
just VA.
VA.
So they're the
VA
only one
only.
with the non-allowables. So that would be considered.
I guess just a heads up, the contract is no longer 10 pages, it's 11. That's the unfortunate change, I would say, this year. And page 11 is the binding agreement date and then the info about agents and HOA info. So I suspect this will go missing
Okay.
because people say it's 10 pages, it's all there. Well,
11
ta-da,
now.
11. 11.
Which was a sad day, but
Yeah, I know. When I saw that, I'm like, ugh.
so
hate
Yolanda, let's
that.
go through now. I pulled up purchase and sell so we can kind of see what it looks like with the new stuff in there. So all of this stays the same. Just remember, kind of as just cleaning up items that remain, a nest, ring, all of those things are considered personal property, even if it's the Nest thermostat. Make sure you list that. So you're not buying that. You're not buying, obviously, I'm sure somebody's bought a refrigerator. at
I'm
some
sure.
point.
I'm sure that-
So I fought for that to be included and was told no. So, sorry.
Yeah, the one cleanup we didn't get are addressing all the electronic
Yeah.
devices. So please write those in. Also, just again, beware all these crazy security system things
Yeah.
that even if the seller leaves them, the buyer can't use them because they've got to Comcast or Xfinity, whoever they are, requires a new
Vivint.
modem. So even if they leave that equipment, we had one come up, one of the agents here in this office, another company that they would upgrade the system if you were already a user, meaning the seller could upgrade the system, but the new buyer is not allowed to upgrade the system. They have to purchase a whole new one. So just make sure, don't assume anything with these security systems.
Yeah.
They're just a mess. They're just a mess.
One that I've seen pop up a couple times in the last couple of months is keys. So I believe a previous contract said all the keys to any exterior door you have to provide. It's all available keys. So if I have a storm door that the owner 3 times ago never had a key to, you know, if that's something that you want, you need to specify that in special stipulations that you have a key to all doors, because if they don't have the key, they're not required to give you the key. And don't let an agent bully you into paying a rekey, because that's not something you're supposed to do.
All buyers should get their house rekeyed as soon as
For
you
sure.
move in. That's,
Yeah.
to me, it's crazy that more don't.
Let's see on here. So
Require that all keys be provided prior to. You make it available.
who was that?
Somebody's TikToking. We should be,
Does somebody have a question? And no, okay. Oh, Callie. Okay. All right. So all this is good. All right. So line 54 through 58. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was totally scared.
It said, you know, that all keys need to be made available at the time to show. We've had this issue before where after closing, the previous owner of the before 12 times ago to provide.
I've had issues where it popped up, but
That said, you know, like listing agent, you need to be able to kind of walk through and show that there's keys.
I mean,
well,
if-
again, it's all available keys.
yeah,
So the argument would be. I
We don't have that
one.
key.
I don't have
The
one.
biggest thing is always communication.
Yeah.
Communication, over communicate, hey, just, here are the keys
Yeah.
that are available, maybe that's part of a property condition disclosure. If you, a lot of times people add pages to property condition disclosure to say like, here are the upgrades we did.
Oh, yeah.
There's like, here are the keys we got.
Yes, so if there's never a key and maybe there's only a Yale lock or something, you can't say, oh, no, you need to make this.
No.
You just-
they would need the master code. That's what you're supposed to provide. And if you don't have that, you can reset it on their website.
Yeah, so if it, and a lot of that is, that's probably, because it doesn't say anything about master codes, does it?
It does. So
It
when you
does.
go up here, it'll say available keys, key fobs,
Yeah.
access
Access
codes,
codes.
master codes, and other methods
So
necessary.
you can demand, hey, I've got to have the codes to get into the house. I have to have the code to the garage so we can get in.
Yeah.
Because you will see that, oh, well, I don't want to give them my code.
Yeah.
What if they never use the code? It's just something.
Again, it's available, right?
Yeah, just reset it at the, or you could, if they wanted to be a nice home seller, they could reset it, follow the instructions and make it 1,
A
2,
lot of
3.
these locks, you can get the master code, you just have to disassemble the entire lock
Right.
and get the serial number from the inside, and it's not something you want to do an hour before you move.
No. No. And always the curtains remain. So just keep that in mind. All curtains remain. We tried to actually make that change because usually you're fighting over $10 curtains from Walmart or
Oh,
Target.
right, right.
But if they're grandma's, stitched curtains, they're probably going to leave with the seller. They're not going to stay there. So just make sure you know that. Okay, line 54 through 58 used to say boxes, meaning you would check, let's say I was approved conventional and FHA and we got denied and I just wanted to send you the conventional denial letter, but I was approved FHA. There's an argument there. So you only have one type when you're going under contract and you would select what that loan type is. Remember, you can switch loan types. You don't have to have their approval as long as it does not make them have any additional costs or it extends closing. So you have that ability.
So again, whatever their worst case is. They want conventional, but they don't want that contingent upon a conventional loan, then you would mark FHA.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And there is a THD conventional product. So what do I put? Like, is it a conventional or is it THDA? THDA was added back, 30 years ago when we could get a THDA loan through. And so you would just select THDA at that point.
I think so, because it's still tied to income, correct? Family size, income.
Yeah. But it's way better than, it's conventional, so that's good. All of this stays the same. Okay. Karen, line 110. Just,
Again, it's saying you're going to terminate via the notification form or equivalent written notice. I would strongly encourage the notification form, not equivalent notice in this case, if it's appraisal, because that notification form stipulates that they're giving required, not requested documents. Again,
capitalize
it's
this.
purchase price. In the case I mentioned, that was 30 grand. They were arguing over it. He didn't want to give the appraisal. The reason the buyer didn't want to give the seller the appraisal, it appraised for purchase price, but the square footage was different. So they were trying to back in
Hmm,
a different way. Clearly, this says it's purchase price.
sorry. Yes, ma'am.
So if you can use that new face value agenda, check the box saying this is not
It is contingent.
It is
Still
contingent.
contingent.
contingent, and we're
You've
We're gonna
just,
just say it's gonna be less than the contract price, pretty much.
when you use that one, when you use the form, the minimum appraisal, what you're doing is replacing purchase price. Everywhere in this agreement right here, everything is tied to purchase price, the appraised value equal or exceeded purchase price. The minimum appraisal simply changes purchase price to this new price that you're agreeing that that's the minimum. As long as it appraises for X, we're good. Does that make sense? So you're not waiving, you don't mark waive because you're not waiving,
You're just altering.
you're altering the
Yeah.
terms of the appraisal contingency. That's a good question. Thank you.
And remember, 3 days. If it's short, you got 3 days to figure it out, or you're gonna be paying the difference pretty much, or your E&O is. All this stayed the same.
I have a question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So do I still, if I have that form, do I just still hit contingent upon appraisal and then I put like in the not special sips, but in the part above that, please,
Addenda.
the addendum?
Yes, ma'am.
I still
Because
hit
you're still wanting it to, you still have the appraisal contingency, it's just lower than your purchase price.
so by basically ask price or whatever we agree upon.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We need one of those throne microphone things.
Yes,
One
we
of those
do.
So bad. Okay, all of this stays the same. Here's this lovely paragraph about public water or public sewer.
This is why we have 11 pages.
Yes, literally. All right, and the best part that they added, here's the inspection section right here. And so here's your new box to check for a pass-fail appraisal on line 330.
Inspection, pass-fail
I mean,
inspection.
inspection, yeah, not appraisal.
Any questions?
On
So
that.
even though you're making the tax bill, you're not asking for it. By giving them, furnishing the seller with a list of written specified objections, seller can at that time say, well, we're gonna still go ahead and fix X, Y, Z.
For sure.
Just to keep this contract.
That would be my recommendation. Hey, we're going to terminate. Same thing we kind of do where we want money. The contract does not give us a path to ask me for repairs. That's like our little realtor option. And so it's the same kind of thing. Hey, we're going to terminate because the beam split. Well, I'm not going to be able to sell it now. I got to tell the next buyer. So you say, well, can we do a credit? Or there's just going to be no formal process. I mean, you could send a proposal, but there's no, you don't really, it would be more of a conversation at that point. But you could definitely ask. For sure. You can always ask.
If you submit the repair,
Then at that point, yes, you would submit probably the amendment. And then really to clean it up, you would probably want to do a purchase and sell amendment that states, there is now a resolution period or some kind of.
Because
something
this
to
one
that
again says immediately terminate. So under the way this is written, if you send in writing the notification that you're terminating and you want your trust money back, you're now terminated. So if your buyer's open, you need to be, again, it's communication. You need to be having conversations with the listing agent. If there's a big issue, in Lee's example, structural issue, and that's the reason the buyer's terminating. If your buyer's open to that seller fixing it and the seller's open to making that repair, I would be talking before I sent termination.
Yeah. Always try to, unless it's
Yeah,
clearly
that's
not
just
going to
a
work.
million things and.
But even if
You're
it's
out.
something small and say, hey, they're looking to terminate over this, just wanted to see if there's any chance to keep it alive. And then that agent's probably going to try everything they can to keep it alive. So. Yes, ma'am.
So you send the seller the list of actions. Telling them all the things that are.
All,
That's not a change.
yeah, that's the same as if you were terminating over, we sent our proposal, which now they know. We didn't resolve, and then on the notification form, you would list, roof damage, structure damage, whatever.
It's not a change. It's not really a change. You always had to specify in the notification form what the objection was.
Even if they
I mean, I have asked before,
I
like,
make it
do
very
you
broad.
want me to say specifics or would you like, what do y'all want? And then go that
Yeah,
way.
no, the spirit of that is just so it's something legitimate, so it's not just like, oh, yeah, they didn't like the inspection.
Yeah.
Okay, but then they're like,
Yeah.
we're not-
Yeah.
found another house.
You don't have to,
You
yeah.
don't have to send them the
You
whole
can send
list.
one thing, that
But-
you've told them, but
Because you have a right to self-inspection.
correct.
Correct.
Something, you have to have something you're terminating over.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's not a change. It's just in a different spot. That was on the list, was on the notification form.
We all clear on?
Any
that?
more questions?
That's a great,
Any
this is a
TV?
lot of good questions and a great addition for sure.
And then obviously now the numbers have been renamed a little bit.
Yep.
Numbers changed
12, 13.
because we added some other items.
They just renamed some stuff, capitalized some things. And then this is exactly where you would put escalation clause exhibit, minimum appraisal, whatever the name is. I don't even know. the name.
Minimum appraisal.
Something, addendum,
Yeah.
you put that there, so. All right, I think that is, that is honestly the meat and potatoes of the changes. There's not a whole lot.
Just a heads up on a couple of the forms, the exclusive buyer agreement and the non-exclusive, which we don't use. Again, it's referencing non-allowable VA expenses. So that's been added. So you're going to see that now in a couple of different places. That amendment to the listing agreement if you change the marketing date, you have it on the listing agreement. We're listing it today, but we're not going to market it till the 18th. Well, if you then change it again, that's now another place on the amendment to the listing agreement. So that one might come into play. No other changes there.
They just kind of cleaned up. This is the backup agreement contingency. So in the event the primary agreement is terminated, the date buyer or buyer's representative receives written notice that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void will serve as the start date for all time periods specified in days in this agreement. So I notify you today, inspection is day 1 tomorrow. Just kind of cleaning that up. Yes, ma'am. I always put something in special steps like closing date to be at least 30 days once offer has moved to primary position.
So would you repeat that question so people don't like to hear it?
So yeah, so like when you get notification of, I'm like looking at the microphone, when you get notification of that you are now the primary contract, it's just specifying that day 1 would be tomorrow. So I notify you today, and then day 1 for earnest monies tomorrow, day 1 for inspections is tomorrow. And then the question was about close date. You can leave it blank, or you can put 60 days out, or you can put in special stipulations, closing to be 30 days, from notification of being primary offer or something
Primary
like that.
contract. That's a good tip.
That's a good, actually something we should probably address next year.
Yeah.
And changes.
I think that's a good tip to put it in special steps that you do want 30 days from when you've been notified. That you're the one.
We're the one.
You're the one.
Okay, here's the investment property addendum.
Please use this.
This is great for short-term rentals, honestly. So line 15 through 18 for properties used as short-term rentals, rental as defined as the Tennessee code. This agreement is contingent upon buyer's receipt, review, inspection, and satisfactory approval of accounting statements for the past blank months, showing the occupancy rate for each month, average nightly rent, da, 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 da.
I would use it for anything that's investment, including not a short-term rental, but let's say I'm buying a property that has a tenant in place and that tenant's gonna stay.
Line number
Is
11.
that all the way until closing though? To the very end, you could be like, hey, we don't actually like the numbers. Yeah. As the buyer.
Let's see, it talks about that. It's a good point. If the above check contingencies are not accepted to buyer, buyer's termination agreement, be a notification form. It did, upon the time, within the agreed upon time frame.
You're probably gonna have an investment type, you're probably gonna have a due diligence period
That's a good
versus,
point.
versus a inspection period. Depending on how far your closing's out and how complicated the property is. And if 30 days is a pretty common due diligence period, if it's a single family home that's, you know, you can get all the information pretty
That's a good
quickly.
point.
I would specify the.
I
due
would
diligence.
probably really put this in special stipulations. And I want this in 48 hours of binding or something, but
I would just do it on the buy side, if I was representing.
Seller.
The seller.
Well, I'd be like, I'm not, you know.
or I would just immediately give them, yeah. But the approval part is satisfactory approval, kind of like satisfactory approval of appraisal. Like, what does that mean? So you probably want to specify if you're the seller, for sure. Good point. Did y'all hear that in TV land? Let me pull up the chat really fast. Is there anywhere the doorbell remains? Christine, you would need to specify any smart appliances that remain. Okay, so the question was, in this form, this does not specify a timeline. So, you know, usually you would want to say within so many days of binding agreement date. The question is, does this go all the way up to closing? And it appears that there is no timeline in here.
It's funny, the line before, it says the following receipt buyer will have fine days to appeal any information, but that refers to what's above it, not the new.
I guess you would want to check that box and this box. That's something we definitely need to address.
As
So
a
the-
listing agent,
yeah.
please do either an addendum or amendment to your purchase and sale agreement, putting or counter something to address this. That, hey, you're gonna have 48 hours upon receipt.
Yeah, the satisfactory approval, because even if we give it to you, when do we get your approval?
I would handle it the same way you handle, for example, copy of review, receipt, and approval of buyer of the CCRs for a neighborhood. If there's not a timestamp on there, as a listing agent, I'm gonna go back and say, you're gonna have, 48 hours from when I give them to you.
All right, we've had this come up before. Well, actually, that was last year, I think.
Yeah, it was
Line
last year.
127. All right, just kidding. This is just notifying that you are now no longer backup. You are a primary offer. This is what it looks like on the notification form.
And again, I would send that because you don't have another place, you don't have anywhere else to kind of timestamp your binding agreement that window starts, right? Because you've written, you agreed to the contract and you've got a binding agreement on the contract of maybe 30 days ago, but you just got notified yesterday that you're now the primary. So you need to know where you're counting from. So this notification form is going to give you that, kind of make the stopwatch start.
And that is all the contract changes.
Those are the highlights, really. I didn't print the new construction.
Let
We can
me,
take a look at it.
gonna
I
probably
think
guess
it's
it
12 pages.
was.
That's the only thing I noticed.
I'm gonna guess they added the as is, an option to as is. Okay, here we go. Just capitalizing agreement and purchase price, because those are important changes. Same thing for financing, just check one box. Probably traditional inspection, I'm gonna guess. Actually, they did not add that to. That's all. So.
Do
Does
we
anybody
have
have
a
any-
copy of this?
Yeah, so if you go to your Tennessee Realtors account and you click on forms on the fly, well, we can email a copy to everybody. I'll just do that. We'll just make it easy.
Okay.
I'll just email the office a copy of the changes, but it is in your Tennessee Realtors forms on the fly account.
I think overall they're great changes.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to have some of these things that we handled appraisal gap one way, another company handled it a different way. The pass fail, we all kind of knew what it meant, but
Yeah.
sometimes the wording wasn't very good.
at all. All right, any general contract questions that you're just itching to ask about, Rebecca?
We got two.
Me too.
It's not about any change, so. I
That's
guess
fine.
before we
Yeah.
be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I have only done that to the once before, so it's a.
Well, altogether, we've done what, 4?
Right.
I mean, let's hear it, but back to the language about buyer cannot pay commission, so the village-based commission retainer, whatever, definitely.
Falls.
That.
Mhm.
What about, if it's, a for sale by owner and the owner's not offering anything, so is that language, in the buyer rep agreement that, you know, in the event that. You know,
That
we're
language is,
trying to-
the VA language is in the buyer rep agreement now.
Oh, so. but
It
is
does
that-
address it.
But is that situation, does that mean, is that a non-allow? So.
Any
like,
commission at
A
all.
VA buyer cannot pay a commission. So
Period.
even if you have a buyer rep agreement
Mhm.
or agency agreement that says, we're gonna do our best to sell the part of a thing, but in the event not, then you're gonna owe me 3%, that's out.
Yep.
That's out the window for VA.
The only workaround, and like you got to tiptoe on this kind of stuff, would be if they did pay you a retainer fee to village. It's not on the settlement statement. It's paid directly to the firm. That's not really a commission. It is a retainer.
You possibly,
I don't know.
if it appraises for more than sales price, you possibly, I guess, could.
Up it, have the seller pay the difference, but then you're
Mhm.
telling the seller their purchase price was less. So, yeah. It actually happened in, I think,
It did happen to
Chattanooga
somebody.
or Knoxville, where the buyer's agent just did not get paid and they did not find out until closing. So that was a fun. for them.
Just be aware on VA, the VA buyer can't pay commission.
And they cannot pay a termite inspection. So the seller has to pay that. If that's an inspection, well, you have to have a termite inspection. Either you are, or the seller's agent is. If the seller's agent or the seller is, you have to put it in special stipulations or the non-allowable
It's not
blank.
allowable.
So.
Or sometimes we put $100.
If somebody pays $1.
I know.
So we're listing it.
I mean,
You could.
yeah, I mean, that is where it's kind of not fair is a bad word because life's not fair. But it's not right. I mean, that should be amended to where they could pay for the services and it not be considered commission, I guess, but.
I mean, these are VA rules. This is not real estate commission. This is not TAR
this is
forms
the
committee.
feds. Yeah.
These are VA rules we're talking about. And again, it didn't change. It's always been this way.
Mhm.
We just didn't know it.
Because of the market now where there
We
are
just didn't
less
know it.
commissions and, that kind of thing.
And Aaron had a question over here.
Oh, yeah, I was curious. So the change, a couple of changes. The backup offer,
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to sign a couple times, but if the backup becomes the primary and you send that notification saying, hey, you're now primary. If they hadn't sent anything saying, we no longer, got another house, whatever, they can still do that, right? They can say, oh, whoops, we're not gonna want to do that. What is the resolution? of that?
So the question is, if you get notified that you're primary before you notify you want to withdraw, what happens? I would just have a conversation with the agent and say, oops, we forgot to send you notification. We'll terminate over repairs if we need to.
Yeah,
do
the
dance.
simple response is gonna be, well, if the seller says, no, they're in. We notified them and didn't tell us.
Right, I mean,
We all know what's gonna happen is you are gonna self-inspect
Or just not turn in earnest money,
or not
they
turn
make
it. right.
demand, and then it's
so
over,
just send me a notification.
for sure. Yeah. That's why I would say if you get under contract on something, and you know it's moving forward, just to close the loop, I would send that, but
Good question.
good question for sure. Let's see, we have a little chat. Welcome. All right, any other contract, anything we should mention? We've seen.
Oh, the trusted service provider form is the process of being updated.
Yeah.
So the new one is not on
I think it still has the old one.
forms. The old one is still on there. It currently says legacy
Legacy and Carney title.
and
So we
Carney
got that
title.
updated.
The new one is we've added a title provider. So that will be on there. And Parks has a third title provider that may be on there as well. So if you see a third one you've never heard of, that could happen. And Jenny is, just to answer your, Jenny is going to get some more disclosure information about Steadfast because of ownership interest
Perfect.
in there. So you're going to see some changes on that. And it should be, will be in there in the next week or so.
Any other questions? I'm trying to think of anything that's popped up. Oh, wait, I want to circle back to this I told last week on, remember they did the escalation clause, they didn't read the
Oh,
agenda,
right.
blah, blah. I left out a pretty important detail. They actually did counter. They just forgot to add purchase price in their counter. So they countered to address other terms. And the one term they forgot to address was the new purchase price.
Ooh, that does make it worse.
So that makes it even worse than,
Because I was kind of disagreeing on
yeah,
that train of thought. So I'm glad you clarified that.
it was interesting, but read the contract.
We still do not have a TAR form for escalation clause. So
Yes.
that is still, that's in your office clauses.
And Tennessee Realtors is never going to provide that. We've asked, they want it to be a broker's decision, not an association decision. So,
So that's in the same spot. You still put it in special steps.
Cindy, is that it behind you that I'm seeing? Because I am slightly terrified.
What is it?
Ah!
Oh.
I love it. How beautiful. Love it. All right. Well, that is all we've got for today. So unless y'all have any other questions, they're good to go.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.